Oh no, that penguin have bad juju.
I've worked at a homeless shelter for years, and I enjoy what I do. My job is simple, and meeting all the interesting people is what makes it fun for me. I simply put on my apron, and I serve food for the soup kitchen. My two most favorite people are Oscar, a regular who somehow keeps a great sense of humor despite his situation. The other is Tom, the director of the kitchen services. We have a lot in common, so we're always talking about sports and movies. I began noticing that the homeless population had been getting worse, and we started having to close down the kitchen before everyone could get a serving, and Tom and I were soon talking about it all the time. It was really becoming a problem, but there was nothing we could do ourselves. We were always shooting ideas, but we didn't have the power to implement anything. One day, Tom pulls me aside and tells me that the director in charge of programs had left, and he could now take the position as well as continue directing the kitchen ministry. I was so excited for him. I knew his passion for helping would translate into any new programs he'd implement. He would find a way to keep the soup kitchen going, which was in dire need. The overpopulation was becoming overwhelming. And so he took the position, and I was quite happy for him. Oscar came to congratulate him afterwards, which is just the kind of guy Oscar is. Tom began to put his new policies into place, and apparently it started working, and quite quickly. Within a month, a survey showed the homeless population began to go down about 10%, and Tom proudly announced the success of his new program. We didn't worry about having enough food now, as Tom informed us that with the new program it would continue to go down for a while. Over the next 6 months, I began to see some drastic changes. There weren't nearly as many homeless people harassing others in the streets, and I enjoyed my job in the kitchen more because I had more time to talk with everyone rather than just putting food on their plates. Also, Tom had cut costs on meat, which is what our food mostly consists of. This cost cutting would give us more than enough food to serve everyone. I asked Tom exactly what he was doing that was making everything work, but he just spoke of it in very vague terms. From my understanding, there was some deception involved. Something along the lines of convincing them to go somewhere else and obtaining meat from other benefactors at a cheaper price. Not long after, there was a special banquet for Tom and his great success for his new program held at the soup kitchen. I fully supported him because unlike many people involved in councils or city programs, he actually did what he said he was going to do. I was assigned to help serve food during the banquet, to which I proudly accepted. As great as it was, it felt bittersweet, as I hadn't seen Oscar for almost a week now. I was very concerned, because it was very unlike him, and I knew he had medication he had to take. There were so many people at the banquet, we had to make some runs to gather things. At one point, I was told to gather some more flour and various items in the cellar, where we kept everything. I had to go alone, which I never enjoyed because it was a very typical dank cellar with the occasional water drip coming from nowhere, like something straight out of a horror movie. While loading up my arms, I accidentally dropped a bag of flour, and it went everywhere. I had to clean up everything, and in the process, I found something very curious as I swept. Near one of the shelves in the back was an outlet, and there was something plugged into it. Usually this wouldn't pique my interest, until I realized that the cord seemed to go nowhere. I looked closer, and realized the cord seemed to be tucked down under the shelf, as if being fed somewhere else. After carefully inspecting, I saw there was no other rooms that were supposed to be there. My curiosity piqued. I began pushing and fiddling on the shelves, knocking on the wood to see if there was a hollow spot, something I've seen done in movies multiple times. You can only imagine my surprise when I did find a hollow area. I pushed on the shelving, and the wall suddenly cracked open. My breath nearly caught in my throat, and I peeked inside. There was a short corridor, ending in another wooden door. Hesitantly, I made my way through, and pushed open the door. What I saw next, I don't really have words to describe my feelings for. 2 rows of beds were laid out before me, 4 on each side. At each bed were numerous people, hooked up to machinery that beeped monotonously under the homofluorescent lighting. The bed nearest the wall had cords that disappeared underneath, the same one that caught my eye back in the cellar. The two most disturbing facts about all these people was that, 1, by their attire they appeared to be homeless. 2, they were all missing limbs. I held my hand to my throat to keep from screaming as the reality of the situation sunk in. What made it even more terrifying was when I found Oscar at the end of the room. Both of his legs had been chopped off. I ran over and tore the mask off his face, which was apparently an anesthesia feed. After a couple of minutes of rousing him, he came to and saw me. Yet instead of looking relieved, his eyes widened in horror and he began shouting. I had to hold him still so he wouldn't roll off the bed in his panicked state. And he apparently was shouting the same thing over and over and over again. It was so frantic and garbled I couldn't understand him. Oscar, calm down. I'm not going to hurt you. Who did this to you? He continued shouting the same phrase slower, and suddenly I realized exactly what Oscar was telling me. Chills racked my body and I vomited. Over and over again, he was saying, "Don't eat the meat. Don't eat the meat."